All right, hi, this is Dan Henk, and welcome to another edition of the Skull Sessions. And today, my guest is JC Banning. That's correct?
WC banning.
Oh, WC Banning. See, I already fucked it up. All right.
Man, but yeah, just like it's
But
new for me too, kind of. So
okay, all right. So let's talk about what you got going on.
sure, yeah. So I just released here last August, stuff Tales from Places. I don't know if you can even, but
Yeah, well, I'll put it on the screen.
yeah. So uh it was just a collection of short stories to introduce the universe of the novel that I'm finishing up right now. I'm about 51,000 words into that. And it'll probably end up being about 80,000. So I'm closing toward the end of that. Basically I write fantasy. I wouldn't necessarily call it high fantasy. It's and one of the stories in here is like kind of a horror story. That's not my
I'm not familiar with all the like categories of fantasy.
yeah. So it's
What's the
weird.
difference between fantasy and high fantasy?
So you've got like low, what people would call low fantasy, which would be like I don't know, the stuff that Terry Pratchett did, like with the Discworld novels and stuff like that. And then you've got high fantasy,
None
which
of
is
which
like
I've read, but
yeah. You got high fantasy, which is like Tolkien, and then you've got like urban fantasy, which mine gets called urban fantasy a lot because it centers around the mall. But that's like Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere. You know,
oh, that's an
that's considered
awesome
urban
book.
fantasy. Yeah, man, it's one of my favorite books of all time. But that's considered urban fantasy, stuff like that, and other
I
things
can
that are
understand the urban fantasy a little bit, like I understand the connection there, but what's the difference between low fantasy and high fantasy?
it's I've never really understood it myself. And I teach writing workshops and I've never really understood it myself. It's there is some kind of connection between like the difference between like, Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or see, and then most people will even say Game of Thrones isn't high fantasy, that it's political fantasy. And like everybody gets into these labels and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what any of it means. But what my stuff has been labeled by people who label these things, by my publisher and other people who do that for a living, is just fantasy
Oh yeah.
with sci-fi elements. And one story in here is considered a horror story, which I wouldn't I don't know, man. Like I just parrot what they tell me to say.
Well, it's weird. Like when my first book came out, and I was like, "Oh, this is definitely horror," but it has a little bit of a sci-fi element. It's more like cosmic horror,
Right, yeah.
And it's like Event Horizon or like Event Horizon is a horror movie. It takes place in space. Like Alien is a horror movie. It takes place in
Place in
space.
space.
You know,
Right.
and so I put it out, and they're like, "You should pitch it as sci-fi." I was like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, because the horror readers, if you tell them, they'll buy it. Even though it has a sci-fi cover. But the people that are expecting sci-fi aren't going to buy it if it doesn't have a sci-fi cover." He was wrong because I put a horror cover on there and it sold like way more copies. And I've been at conventions where people were like, I would have never bought it if I thought it was sci-fi.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, people are weird.
well, I mean, I get the same shit from this book because people will read the fantasy stuff and they'll be like, "Oh, it's good, but I really only cared for the dog." And I was like, "Well, what do you normally read?" And they're like, "Well, we normally read horror and stuff." And I'm like, "Okay." And then they're like, "Man, you write like Stephen King." And I was like, "Okay, please don't put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. Like I don't
Well,
write like Stephen King, man.
Stephen
He's
King
great.
does
I don't
have
write
some
like
great elements. It's
yeah.
probably like an insult to say you write just like this guy. But if you say, oh, you have like realistic characters like Stephen King, Yeah, no, that totally is appropriate.
That's fine, but man, and I'm all about standing on the shoulders of giants, but like comparing me this early in my writing or this early in my professional writing career to Stephen King it's not fair to Stephen King, I don't think. So,
Yeah. Well,
but
if people compare me to Neil Gaiman, I'd have absolutely no problem.
yeah, man, that's another thing. And the first story in this book was I didn't win anything, I got disqualified. Um,
How'd you get disqualified?
because it's me. But
but how'd you get disqualified? I don't understand.
okay, I'll clarify that here in a second. But I sent it to NYC Midnight, their yearly short story competition, and
Okay.
they sent me back some really good critiques and stuff on it. But so I did their yearly NYC Midnight's yearly short story writing competition. I got some really good feedback from them. And the one guy's like, yeah, this really reminds me of Tolkien. And I was like, okay, I'm going to walk away for a second, catch my breath. Somebody comparing me to J.R.R. Tolkien. That's great. But um, then I got disqualified because one of the requirements was that you included a window washer in your story when you wrote it. And I did, but he wasn't enough of a central character. So they disqualified me. But they're like, if we hadn't have disqualified you, you would have been in one of the top spots. I'm like, great, that means nothing. So thank you guys.
Well, that was like an element that was like specific to the competition or something.
Yeah. So they'll give you a theme, and then they'll give you elements you have to include. It's usually 3 elements. I believe the elements for that one were reconstruction / rebirth. It had to be like set in kind of a high fantasy setting. Once again, we're back to high fantasy, and it had to involve a window washer. I don't think it was high. It had to be high fantasy. It just had to be fantasy, but then it had to involve a window washer. And like the person who won, the whole story was about the window washer. That was great, but I got like,
Was
I
it a
had
good
like,
story that won?
oh yeah, it was fantastic. But I got like 1,500 words in, and I was just double checking stuff as I was wrapping the story up, and I was like, oh man, there's nothing about a window washer in here. And so I just kind of added the window washer in as kind of a deus ex machina toward the end. And it wasn't enough. And so it got me disqualified. But that's what usually
You should have
happens.
said like you didn't read deep enough. Like there were people in there that were actually the window washer, but you didn't understand that he hit it so well. Like
Yeah, I
you
should
felt
have.
played.
I should have tried to play it off a little bit better than I did, but I was just like, yeah, he was kind of an afterthought. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Like, I was pretty far into the story, and I was like, crap, I was supposed to add a window washer to this, but it ended up making a good lead off story for this because it's even though the dog thing that everyone talks about is on the cover, it's very H.P. Lovecraft. That story was very
Well,
H.P.
Lovecraft
Lovecraft
is
to
one of my
me.
favorites. Wait,
Yeah,
why does it say 10 cent on it? Like, I mean,
oh
that's the
yeah.
throwback to like Amazing Tales and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
for sure. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. So Aaron Ray, the guy who made this, and there's actually the back of it. The guy who made this, I was like, dude, I kind of
or
want this to be a
actually, sorry, it's Amazing Stories and Weird Tales. Yeah.
yes,
I,
yeah. I wasn't gonna correct that. That was not the kind of thing. I'm gonna sit here and correct Dan Hank on what he's calling comic books. But no, this guy, this graphic designer that helped me put together this cover, I did the sculpture that makes up the cover there.
well, that's
Like I
awesome.
did the sculpture of the dog, but then he came up and like put it together to put it on, And I told him, I was like, man, I just kind of want this to be a love letter to old pulps, because I read a lot of pulp novels back in the day. I read like a lot of Edgar Rice Burroughs, and it was funny. I was telling my kid the other day about Tarzan going to Mars, and he's like, "What are you talking about? Tarzan never went to Mars." And I was like, "You need to read the books, kid."
I
But
thought
like,
did you see the movie John Carter Mars?
yeah, I
I
thought it was
actually really
okay,
liked it.
man. I thought it was fine.
Yeah,
Everybody hated that shit, but I was like,
that apparently that like put a big damper on that actor's career. I thought it was great. I loved it.
well, and making any more of the Burroughs pulps into movies pretty much got scrapped because everybody hated it so much. And I look back on it and I'm like, yeah, I guess the Mars series is kind of weird for a lot of modern day audiences, but I grew up on it, so I loved it.
I would say that is high fantasy though. It's like it's totally taking it out of bounds and he's telling a story. You know, it's
Yeah,
like
and it's epic and it's
yeah.
huge. Like that's another one of the things they say about high fantasy is that it has to be epic, it has to be huge, it has to be like this it has to be this big overarching tale, and that's part of the like what makes something high fantasy. And I'm like, okay, but
I
like,
wonder if that kind of dichotomy that they have, like they do in sci-fi all the time. Like they say Star Wars is space opera, whereas
yeah,
like Star Trek is like more realistic. I mean,
yeah,
I like both, although I actually like Star Wars better than Star Trek. Well, the early Star Wars, they totally jumped the shark now, but yeah.
I, I'm weird, man. I'm of two minds on the Star Trek, Star Wars fight. I think Star Trek and Star Wars have their own very specific appeals. I think that I love Star Wars. I've always loved Star Wars. It's great. It's a space western to me.
Right.
Like that's how it feels, and that's which is why I liked the Mandalorian so much, is because it really plays up that
Oh, that
space
first season
western
is
thing.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. The first season's great. The second
It's
season was
kind of like
okay.
Firefly.
It
You
just,
know,
yeah, it reminded me of Firefly. It really did, man. And I
no,
always
you're right.
wanted
The
that
sixth
show to come
season goes
back.
downhill. I didn't even watch the third season. It came out, and I heard what's the actor who plays the Mandalorian? I heard he's not even in the costume half the time.
Pedro Pascal, yeah,
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
busy or injured or something and wasn't in the costume half the time. That's I've heard that as well. The new Star Wars stuff is all over the place, and in my mind, they need to just take that lady. I forget her name because I don't like her much, but they need to take her and do something with her, and just let
Take her back and shoot her in the head.
yeah, man, something, and just let
I remember when they had like they
Clone
had
Wars dude handle
creatures
things. What
with
is his name?
horses on like running on the wings of a spacecraft. I was like, dude, I'm out. This is crap.
Yeah, man, and it's like people make all these different arguments, and they're like, "Oh, you just don't like it because it's not the source material, this and that." It's like Rings of Power. Everyone's like, "Oh, you just don't like it because they changed this or that." I was like, "Man, I don't care what they changed. I don't care about the races of the characters and any of that stuff. I'm all for diversity. I don't care about any of that stuff. The writing is crap. That's what I care about.
No,
The writing
I
is
agree.
crap."
It's a strong story. They're so stuck on this like being woke with everything that it's like they forgot about the story. They're like, we just want to be representative. It's like you want a strong female character. Look at Alien. Look at Sandra Connor in Terminator. I mean, you can't get more hardcore than that.
No, and like like I said, I'm all about diversity and including people and stuff. I try my best to do it in my stories. I think it's wonderful. And that would never be the wokeness would never be some reason that I was against anything, but it's the poor writing and just
Yeah,
the
no, when it's
fact that
appropriate.
everything is cookie cutter these days,
Yeah.
man. And it's that's my problem with all of it. That's what's happened to Marvel, in my opinion. It doesn't matter that they've replaced some masculine characters with feminine characters. None of that matters. I don't think
All
that
that
makes
matters is
something
the
inherently
story.
bad. All
Like
that
I
matters is that the
remember
story's not
Marvel
there.
did they did the Power Man series. I don't know if you saw that. It's really good. and I was like, well, that totally makes sense. Like everything in that makes sense. Of course, it's a black guy. Of course, he's getting shit for like everything from his race, his location, all this stuff. It goes with the story, so it just strengthens the story, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it's like Jessica Jones, man.
Yeah, I
You
like
don't
that
get it.
too.
You
Yeah.
don't get any more strong female character than Jessica Jones and all the bullshit she deals with from all the crazy men in her life and stuff. That's great. That's fine. The writing's
And
there. It
I
was a
thought
good
actually,
story.
if you want to go the like, if you kind of want to like do a deep dive into it, I thought Iron Fist was crap because they got like kind of like a slightly overweight British guy. It's like you need like Bruce Lee or something. Like it's like that one they totally miscast.
He starts out kind of out of shape in the comics and then gets
Yeah.
further in shape as it goes along, but you have to do that. On the converse of that, man, like I hate it when there's a character that's supposed to be a fat guy, because man, I've been a fat guy for like 80% of my life. I hate it when there's a character that's supposed to be a fat guy that gets cast as a skinny guy. It's like that movie with Jack Black in it. Um the house with the clock in its wall. Yeah, house with the clock in its walls. Like the main character is supposed to be this fat kid, and they hired this like really in shape, like almost ripped little kid for this. And I'm like, how are we gonna do half of this movie? Like half of the story was because the kid was getting bullied because he was fat, and they
Yeah.
don't want to do that. So it's the thing of when something is integral to a story and they change it, um, or like that's the only time that really matters to me. Like I don't really care about, like I liked the super unpopular opinion here. Speaking of Stephen King, I liked the Dark Tower movie. I thought it was
Okay.
fine. If people would have listened to the writers of the film, that this is not the telling of anything Stephen King has told before. We talked to Stephen King. This is a retelling of another cycle in the Wheel of Ka. This is a brand new story of Roland. And so I was fine. Like Idris Elba's a great actor. The writing was
Oh yeah,
okay.
yeah, he's
Like
awesome.
it
Yeah.
it wasn't the greatest writing in the world, but the writing was okay. Like Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey sold that movie, man. They carried it on their shoulders. And
Well,
so
imagine if it
like
was well written with like two actors of that caliber. It would have been like an Oscar-worthy movie.
yeah, no, it really would have been. And I have no problem with the casting of the characters. I think it was great. And I liked the movie for what it was. But if the writing had have just been that one little notch better, it would have been way better. And like, but people talk about the sequel trilogy and all this stuff. I could care less about any of the elements that make it diverse or woke or what have you. None of that's what bothers me. What bothers me is the inconsistencies in the writing, and they set up so much in the first sequel film that they never followed through with in the rest of the films. Like Finn got did dirty, man. Like that dude got done so dirty. They set him up to be like this big character and nothing happened to him. And I was like, that's my problem with the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, I think this is the last thing that we should say because we want to talk about your stuff. But
Yeah.
what I was gonna say is like the there are a couple of movies where like they wouldn't take the character, they take whatever character they thought would sell the movie better, and that ruins the story.
That and it ruins any of our, as artists, anything we're trying to do to make a more diverse world or anything like that. It cheapens it. It's like I tell people all the time about like Pride Month and shit. You see all of these companies jump out and start like just slapping rainbows on everything, and it
That
actually
kind of dilutes it,
it
actually.
dilutes it. Yeah,
Yeah,
man, that's a perfect word for it. It
it's
makes it
like
mean less.
I've ever since I first stepped out of my parents' house, and I've always been around because I've been like as a teenager as a punk rocker. So you hung out with everybody who wasn't like a jock.
Exactly. Yeah. I
So
mean,
we had the drama kids. We had like there are non-racist skinheads. I guess a lot of people don't know that. The punk rockers and like we all hung out together. And there are plenty of gay people. And the way that they are is not the way that they're often portrayed you know, in movies or in Hollywood. It's like you know, it's kind of like a they take a stereotype and they just amplify it. And they're like, oh well, you gotta love this. Like, well, I'm not homophobic. I just don't love that because that's not a correct portrayal.
yeah, it's not, and it's like I'll never forget one time. Man, I DJ'd in a gay bar for like 15 years in downtown Fort Smith, Kincaid's, and someone was talking to one of my buddies and I. We were at a diner after the bar closed, and they're like, "Oh, where you guys coming from?" And I was like, "Oh, Kincaid's." And I was like, "Oh, neither of you seem gay." And I was like, "What does gay seem like? Like I'm not gay, but I'm not gay, but what does gay seem like? Please let me know." My buddy who's sitting there with me was gay, and he's like, "Yeah, what does gay seem like?" And they just kind of got wide-eyed for a second. And I was like, "No, seriously, I need you to describe to me what you think a gay man is."
People are
And
fucking morons. Yeah.
no, they really are. And but it's gotten into popular culture because people are like, "Oh, well, this is what we need to do to sell to these people who feel a certain way." Nah, man, that's not. You're gonna get me to not buy your products because you're in my mind, you're just as bad as Chick-fil-A if you're over here branding all your stuff for gay people just for 1 month out of the year. It's
Oh,
just
there's
as
a guy I
bad. And
talked
I
to for my podcast. That apparently like the owners of Chick-fil-A obviously are very religious, but a lot of the people that work there are not. And he wrote a story like it was a whole like zombie whatever story, and like he was making jokes with them about like oh, can I have like violence or cursing in this, and like but they loved it. So he did like he was telling me he's like they were actually very cool to me because like I'd make Jesus jokes and they'd laugh.
yeah, I mean, and that's what I do. I do hear that too. Like I won't shop there because of some of the shit they give their money to, but like I do
No,
have a really
I hear
close
you. I don't buy their shit either.
I do have a really close friend at work. His wife works there and she's like a really decent person. And I've known people who worked at our local Chick-fil-A. There was one of the managers, he was gay and he got a lot of crap for working at Chick-fil-A.
Oh, they
But
give you crap for being gay and working at Chick-fil-A?
yeah, no, he got a lot of crap from his friends.
Customers? Oh,
From his
okay.
friends because he
Oh,
worked
okay.
there. And we had the conversation one day. I was like, guys, if you're giving him crap because that's his job and he works there, are you not just as bad as them because you're giving him crap for
Plus,
working there?
he's taking money from that guy. So
Yeah.
that guy is paying him
He
to
used to say
support
that
his
all the
gay
time.
lifestyle. So, fuck the owner. He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, apparently.
Yeah, no, he used to say that all the time. He used to be like, they pay me. He's like, so but the point of all that is it takes all kinds and like that's kind of what led me to start talking about all that was obviously we were talking about films and stuff, but it's a weird segue back into my own stuff because you do find a lot of stuff in here that I get a lot of, I don't know, criticism from people sometimes for being too woke, and I'm like, man, these are the same people who are saying, man, the X-Men are suddenly woke. The X-Men have always been woke, dude. Like the X-Men have always been anti-racist and anti this and that and the other. And I get a lot of flack for being anti-religious. And I grew up in a very religious family, a very
Oh, so did
religious
I, yeah.
household. And like I grew up Pentecostal, man. And I grew up, like you said, hanging around with all the punk kids and everything. And
Oh, I
like
got a
it
joke for you.
was,
I got a joke for you. You want to
oh,
hear
nice. Yeah,
it?
yeah.
So why are vampires so scared of crosses?
I don't know.
Because they're allergic to bullshit.
That's great. That's great. Oh God, I love it. We just been watching the Righteous Gemstones a lot lately, and we kind of been binging that. And I'm like, man, there's so much childhood trauma involved in this. Like, man, it reminds me so much. So we got this mega church here in Fort Smith, Arkansas, that we went to as a kid, and like, I was just like,
They probably closed the doors during COVID and said, get the fuck out. I'm just saying.
I mean, you're not wrong, but so no, it was fully that kind of stuff, and so a lot of that, I mean, a lot of that is in the stories, and especially the poems in the middle. There's a poem on page 46 of the book called "I Don't Believe," and it's
Okay.
talking about how I don't believe of all this. I don't believe in all this shit, so on and so forth. But at the end, it's like it basically kind of turns around into, but just because I don't believe in it doesn't mean you can't. Let's not hate each other. Let's try to be
Yeah, no,
friends with
I
everybody
agree.
if we can.
Like, as
And
long as you don't push your shit on me, I don't care. You can believe whatever you want. You know,
and that's where I'm trying to get, because someone told me the other day, they're like, man, with all this tolerance, you're always preaching all the time that we should be tolerant to all these people and this and that and the other. You're really intolerant toward Christians. And I was like, yeah, man, I am, because they've done a lot of damage to me and my friends and family throughout the years. So yeah, I am, man. And
the Inquisition, the
yeah, yeah.
Crusades,
It's just,
the decimating of South America.
oh man, but nobody even knows about that. I was talking to somebody about that the other day, and no one knows about the Protestant Inquisition and a lot of stuff that happened during the Protestant Inquisition. Most people don't know about that stuff that happened here in the States. Like a lot of the natives that were killed just because they wouldn't simple word I can't think of. Anyway,
They wouldn't
convert.
convert, yeah.
Yeah, they wouldn't convert. And
Yeah, my late wife was Colombian, and she hates, like Catholicism is like the big thing, so she hates
yeah.
religion.
Oh
But
yeah.
like their native language was destroyed because it was sacrilegious because it didn't follow their like gray-bearded guy in the sky.
It's so man, it's all so stupid, and it all just ticks me off. And it feels like everything is so polarized nowadays. And I get scared, honestly, creating stuff sometimes, because I was a journalist for 20 years. I was a stringer, and then I finally became a staff writer, and I was a standing editor at a little hometown newspaper here in Poto, Oklahoma, which is right across the Arkansas Oklahoma border from me. And dude, I tried to be as unbiased as I could be. Like I'd put a political cartoon in that was left leaning one day, and I'd put a political cartoon in that was right leaning the next day. Like I made sure I did it that way. And I'm getting death threats from both sides over here over these cartoons and stuff. So bad we had to pull them from the paper. Like people were coming down to the office telling me, "You see this gun on my hip?" And I'm like, "I see it. You better
Really?
kill me with the first."
They're like
Yeah,
threatening
I
you
was
like
like,
that. Like
"Yeah." I
I
was like,
did
kill me with the first shot, motherfucker, but I see it."
As a side note, I did like one of my first gigs was doing political cartoons for Mad Cat magazine,
That's
which they
crazy.
sold in on Capitol Hill in DC. And the thing is, I'm mostly
That's
libertarian,
nuts.
so I make fun of everybody.
Yeah.
So I remember like the first cartoon I did for them was, do you remember the contract with America the Republicans were pushing? So I
Oh
did a
yes. Yep. Yep.
cartoon
Yep.
called The Contract on America. And I had like Jesse Helm dressed up in like a Nazi outfit, and he was the Minister of Information. And I had Newt Gingrich, and he was like the mob boss, and he played spaghetti and stuff. So they loved that. Then, like the next one, I was making fun of Hillary Clinton, and all of a sudden, everybody hated me. But the thing is, I'd get all this outrage, but it would sell more papers.
Yeah, that was the thing, and like I tried really hard not to do that, especially when I was standing editor. I'd try really hard not to do that. I had another reporter that worked with me sometimes who said I wasn't hard edged enough because I wouldn't push the envelope. And I was like, man, I'm gonna push the envelope, but I'm gonna push the envelope in both directions. And she was pretty right wing, and so when I'd push any like left wing stuff, or when I'd even go like left of center just a little bit, she'd get upset about stuff. And this was right around the time they were legalizing marijuana in in Oklahoma, and I was doing a lot of stuff on it. You know, the
When
legalities
was
of
that?
it,
What year
and
was that?
I think it was 2018, man. It was either 2018 or 2019 when they had started doing it, and she's like, there's too much. There's too much being put in here. I don't know why I sound like Rick Sanchez when I talk like her, but she's like, there's too much weed stuff being put in here. And I'm like, but that's the news right now, man. Like we're talking about weed a lot. Like, and what's wrong with weed? And she was like,
Right.
oh man, it's drugs, it's this and that and the other. And I was like, man,
And
you're
what
very
alcohol is not?
yeah, no, I seriously got into that. I was like, look, you man, I know you're a very Christian lady. I was like, where does pot come from? And she's like, what? And I was like, it comes from a plant, man. It comes out of the ground. Like,
Right.
and I like, it's about as natural as medicine can get. Like, you can abuse anything, man, but like, this stuff is helping people. And I was like, I had local experts coming in and talking to me about how it was helping people and how it was good for people.
And
And then
they
I had,
offered, I had brain cancer and they offered to me. Like I didn't take it, but I don't like to do anything, you know. And
same, yeah, I don't like to
I'll
feel
stay
high.
straight and I'll deal with it, you know. But yeah, no, I knew a lot of people with PTSD, both like former soldiers and I'm in New York, people that are in the Twin Towers and stuff. It
Shit, yeah,
really
yeah.
helps them.
Yeah, man. And it's like, but all this stuff, my point with this is all this stuff gets politicized and that shouldn't get politicized. All this stuff is politicized and it shouldn't be politicized at all, man. It's like, why are we talking about this why are we talking about kids being able to eat when they're at school in a political way? Like you're fighting to get the 10 commandments put up in your schools and things and in your government buildings, but you won't let kids have free lunch. That just seems like way separated from it. And so like I get into stuff like that sometimes, and I the novel that's coming up, I get into it pretty heavily. I get into childhood abuse a lot because man, I'm not I'm not on any, and I say this anytime I say this publicly, I'm not here to out my mom as a horrible parent because she did the best she could with what she had, man, because she was
My
very
parents are
mentally
horrible.
unstable.
I'll just say it right now. My parents are horrible. Like
My mom was horrible, but she had some excuses. She she was raised in an abusive setting herself, and she was very mentally unstable from this and all the other abuse and shit she had dealt with in her life, and she just kept the cycle going, man. Like, and she was abusive to me. I tell everybody the other night, like we were watching some movie and there was a Plymouth Reliant K in that film, and that's the first car we got after my dad died in 88. My mom went and got a new Plymouth Reliant K, and it was so fresh. It was just cherry, man. Super fresh looking car. And we'd always had all these old bangers because my dad was a career Navy guy.
I
And
mean,
so
that's
we'd
career
always had
army,
these,
yeah.
yeah, we'd always had these bangers, and he was always fixing them up and everything. And they were great. Like these old bangers ran good and they were nice. It wasn't like they were unsafe or anything. This is the first new car we had had in my family. Like this was a big deal. And I was sitting in the back seat, like buzzing my teeth, just making a buzzing noise because I'm autistic as shit. And so I was just sitting back there buzzing, and she just backhands me. And
Why?
like, I
For
guess
the
I was
noise, I
annoying
guess.
her. Yeah. And she just backhands me, and like I spit blood across the back seat of this
Holy,
Reliant
so a
K,
hard
man.
backhand, yeah.
Yeah, no, dude. And that lady could hit. She grew up with 12 cousins, 12 boy cousins, so she could fight. And I always say the best thing my mom taught me as a kid was how to take a hit. And everybody goes, "Oh shit, oh no, man." And I'm like, "No, man, laugh about it. It's funny. Like I'm over it. Like I'm not over it, but like I deal with it. It's fine." But I deal with child abuse and child assault and stuff kind of at the beginning. I don't go into graphic detail about it, but these kids are running away basically from their parents because their parents are addicts and abusive, and um they're running away from them, and that's what ends up getting them eventually into the Maya Mall, which is the mall at the center of the universe. The Maya is the Maori word for stuff. So you see stuff a lot in my writing because
No, that's
people are
awesome.
so
Oh,
the stuff thing came from me not wanting to. People be like, "What are you going to name this? What are you going to name this mall? What are you going to name this place?" And I was like, "Shit, I don't know, man. It's a mall I dream about. Like it's a mall where the setting of all my dreams are, and I have all these weird dreams, and they all happen in this mall because
well,
I grew up in
people
malls,
always want
man."
more details in finding stuff. It's like when I read Neverwhere, it was like he's got to spell out every single element. It's just like I'll just go with the story. I enjoy it.
Yeah, man. Like, and it's just like he did a great job in Neverwhere though, like telling us where stuff was and talking about real life places in London below and stuff. Neil Gaiman's great at that. But the mall is based kind of around Phoenix Village Mall here in Fort Smith, Arkansas, that I grew up in because I think most of the dreams I have that are in a mall, it's probably like Phoenix Village that's in my head. Of course, it always gets weird and trippy in my dreams and stuff, but
Well,
like
I'm
it's
sure it helps if it's like a little grounding in reality, so you can go, "Oh, I remember this," or this,
right.
obscure
Yeah.
element comes to you. Yeah.
It was also a weird ass mall, man. So like this mall had been there since like the early 70s, and then they had built another mall that was way more corporate. But this was like, I don't know if you've ever seen Mallrats, but this was like the dirt
No.
mall. Oh yeah, man. Mallrats is one of my favorite
It's
movies
just
of all
not my
time.
kind of movie. I've
I
seen
get
way
that.
too many horror movies, but that's not my kind of movie.
Yeah, man. See, I'm really heavily into the goofy ass comedies. Like I like that shit a lot. I like that and high fantasy a lot. So I also love horror too. Like I watch a lot of horror, but like I probably default to the goofy ass shit most of the time because it's
Well,
just like
I like
it's
the
kind of my bread and
comedies that are
butter.
kind of like tongue in cheek,
Yeah.
Monty Python's The Holy Grail. That was awesome. Life of
Oh, so
Brian was
good.
awesome.
Yep.
Some stuff that's like a little bit more. It's almost. I hate to say it's a little bit more intelligent, but it's like it's more direct sarcasm.
Yeah, and we showed Monty Python and Holy Grail to my well, he turned 12 on good lord. He turned 12 today. Um so we celebrated his birthday about a week ago because he went with his biological dad to San Diego, and so we celebrated his birthday already. But today is his actual birthday. But anyway, we showed him, he turned 12 today. We showed him Monty Python and the Holy Grail for the first time because one of his mom's favorite movies. And I actually loved the play. I've seen the play quite a few times, Spam a lot. It's just a little bit longer.
I
It
heard
just
it's
adds
awesome.
some
I've never
shit
seen
to it.
it. Yeah.
Dude, it's fucking amazing. Anyway, so at the end when they all get like arrested and carted off in the cop car, he just turns around and looks at me and he's like, "What the hell?" And I was like, "Yeah, man." And so it's like for 3 days, he's just talking to me about what happened. And his mom is annoying the shit out of him because she keeps going, "They got arrested." And he's like, but how? And he just keeps thinking about it. And I was like, "Yeah, man. Like that's what they wanted. That's what they were trying to do. You've been thinking about that movie for 3 days. That's exactly
You probably
what is it,
never
Eric
seen
Idle?
the
Eric
Monty
Idle and those
Python
guys.
series. The Monty Python series is very tongue in cheek.
I loved
Like
it so
he sells the
much.
guy like a
So
pet
much,
ant,
dude.
and he has a bird cage. At the end, it escapes. He goes, "Yeah, but they're cheap. Just buy another one."
And now for something totally different.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I loved that show. I don't even know if that's streaming, but the kid would love that show. He loves that type of stuff. But that's I think it's so good when something is that well done and that classic that it can, it kind of transcend generations like that. Um, and that type of, but that type of mall, anyhow, it was very indicative of what happened in the 80s, when we started getting commercialism, like that was corporate commercialism, not individual commercialism, if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
no, it
Like,
does. Yeah,
I feel like it switched over in the 80s to where it stopped being about you as a person and it started being about you as a demographic.
exactly. Yeah,
And yeah, and so that mall it had local stores in it. It wasn't just chain stores and outlet stores and stuff. And so it had all these like local people, and I watched it throughout the 90s, even trying to survive, because my mom worked at a cafeteria in there, after she'd been a florist. Mom was a florist. Mom still said on her obituary that she was a florist. Like, she wanted us to put on her obituary that she was a florist, but you can't fucking survive as a florist. So she stopped doing flowers in the mid 90s and started working at this cafeteria in there, which was awesome because I'd walk around all fucking day, man, with my Walkman, listening to, like, fucking the Misfits and Aerosmith. And I always get so much shit for liking Aerosmith as much as I did from my friends, because my friends were like, "Man, I can't believe you like Aerosmith so much." And I've
maybe you
still
have to
got to,
decide with your friends. I'm not a fan of Aerosmith.
yeah,
I don't hate whatever you're into is whatever you're into, but it just didn't do it for me.
yeah, man, it didn't for my buddies either. Like, but I still have, and it pisses one of my friends still gets pissed off about this. My battle vest still has a big fucking half back Aerosmith patch on it. And he's like, "Man, take that shit off, dude. I'm embarrassed to be seen with you." He's like, "Steven Tyler looks like somebody's grandma." And I was like, "Yeah, man, I met him at Disney. He does, dude." But nah, man, I just grew up walking around listening to all that shit, and like local punk music and shit, that they'd come out with tapes and they'd just hand them to you at shows, or they'd come out with CDs and they just hand them to you. I eventually had to get a CD Walkman. I remember when it happened, because people started handing out CDs and I had to listen to them.
Yeah, I remember I was
And
so mad because I listened to like I had Walkmans, listened to tapes for so long. I was like, really? Now I have to buy CDs?
the shit's
And
so
then like the first
expensive.
CD players, like if they moved it all, suddenly it would disrupt and you couldn't hear it. See, these ones were kind of insulated, so they bounced around. It
Yup.
wouldn't stop it. Yeah, it wasn't good.
I had a whole, like, compartment in my messenger bag that I had filled up with fucking soundproofing foam that we had torn down from a local music hall. And I had put my Walkman in. I'd carved out a spot to put my Walkman in it so it wouldn't bounce around, so I could just walk around listening to my Walkman. God, memories. But anyway, I think that's where that all comes from, is hanging out in that mall so much and just sitting there for hours, man, and like listening to old radio broadcasts on like the AM FM, because I had a separate little AM FM radio that I'd listen to sometimes, and I get bored. And back then they still had radio shows on the local AM stations around here. And so I'd listen to all these reruns of these old radio shows and stuff, and like sitting there reading those pulps and everything. And that's just kind of what built this universe, was all the comic books and being in the mall and listening to all this music and stuff kind of built up these characters and this world that all centers around this mall, and all the anchor stores are gates to different worlds. And so the Earth Gate has been shut because we shut ourselves off from magic.
Would you say it's a little bit kind of a vibe like Stranger Things?
Maybe, because the story is maybe, and I say maybe because the story starts in the story of the first novel starts in the 90s, and you're kind of in small town Arkansas in the 90s when it starts out, and then they transition into this mall. But the weird thing about this mall is it's not a place like to the just everybody would go to shop, you know, because it's the hub of all these universes, and humans are not heard of. Seeing a human there would be like seeing a unicorn, you know, like seeing a unicorn there would be way more common than seeing a human, because there's something that a human mage did. It's about 170 years ago at the beginning of my story.
Interdimensional mall.
Yeah, yeah, but it's like the mall is like I don't know if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, but, and a lot of people probably aren't going to get this reference if they haven't, but when you go outside of like the planets, you've got wild space that connects to different planets in Dungeons and Dragons. And the mall would be kind of like wild space. The mall is the space between. The mall is the kind of the in between everything else. Rather than it being the upside down like in Stranger Things, the mall is the in between. It's the place where all these races and different groups of people come together, and they have shops and they're able to share their different wares. And you know, the people of Brixton who are like, it's a sea world, man. It's a water world. They're all pirates and sailors and privateers. And so they're able to bring all their wares in and share their food and their products that they make with the other people, like that are maybe from Ulmarange, which is a huge, like, landlocked world, right? And so these human kids find their way in, even though they're not supposed to be able to, because the door to the mall has been closed to humanity. And there are still people from the mall. The mall has its own police force, and I think it's hilarious. A lot of people don't think it's as funny as I think it is, but they're mall cops. They're multi-dimensional mall cops. And they're like this really elite force that come from all these different races, and they have all these magical powers and shit, but they're still mall cops. And I just think it's hilarious.
That's a cool twist, though. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a cool twist. There's a story. It's The Sound of Silence. Well, it's page 27 in the paper version of the book, but I think it's still page 27 on the EPUB too, but it's a story of one of the mall cops, and it's kind of a lead into the novel, because they'll talk about the main bad guy you see at the end of that story a lot in the novel. Not necessarily by name, but you hear noise about him. And I mean, it's at the end, the main big bad is the forgetting. It's the fact that people forgetting wonder and magic has crept into the world. And that, of course, goes back to me growing up on 80s dark fantasy, because it was always like, you know, never ending story shit.
Like a little bit of a trope that people use, like Neil Gaiman used it. Like, I don't know if you read the Graveyard Book.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's very good.
So
but it's like, you know, you get to a certain point and you just forget.
Yeah.
Like, it does not exist. You just like, or like, you know, like Lock and Key. I don't know if you saw the series Lock and Key, where like the mom, because she's an adult, she can't see fantastical things or hold them in their mind, you know.
Yeah, it doesn't. Spiderwick. They did kind of a reboot of the Spiderwick Chronicles recently, television series, and man, let me tell you, that was it was a Roku channel original, and it shocked me. And at first, I thought, man, this is going to be corny, but they had it was really good. They had some really good actors and some well known actors, and uh man, can't remember the can't remember the main guy's name. It's Christian something, the actor. But dude, he did a fantastic job playing the big bad in that, and it did the same thing. It was like the adults couldn't see all the stuff that the children saw, but the thing is, in the Mayamall, what's happening to the Mayamall, and when the first novel starts, it's goes a little deeper than that. It's not that just they've forgotten or that the adults have forgotten and the adults can't see. It's that society as a whole, especially on Earth, has forgotten so much about wondrous things that they have ceased to exist. They have completely ceased to exist on Earth, and all of the worlds that have shut themselves off from magic have caused this malevolent presence to begin to exist that is actually trying to erase all of history.
Yeah, that's cool twist.
And yeah. So it's you learn that pretty early on in the book. You learn some more stuff. It's a little deeper later on that I don't want to necessarily spoil because it hasn't came out yet.
This is a book series.
Yeah, so I've got 3 books planned for this one specifically. I've got the first one. The second one very heavily involves the train that travels all the way across all the way through the mall. It goes takes you to any place you want in the mall. It's very very moving staircases train, like it just kind of is there. And has the ways it goes are very magically unexplained. But it can get you pretty much to any of the world gates you want to go to. And so the second book's pretty heavily about that. The third book kind of wraps that series up. And then I've got another series that kind of focuses on another couple of kids, that aren't related to the first two, that kind of give us some more insight about the rest of the world and the way the mall works.
All has kind of the same continuity like comic books do, but they aren't necessarily the same exact characters.
Right. Yeah, it's very much a like Terry Pratchett's Discworld or like Stephen King's Dark Tower series. It's going to all very much come back together eventually, and I'm going to do, if I can get all this done before I die, I'm going to do another set of novels.
Well, we could all die tomorrow. I don't know.
That's the idea of it, man. I have had so many like health issues, and when I was younger, so many questionable moments that I constantly think, if I can get this done before I die, because who knows when it's coming, man. And I often say to people,
like closer to nuclear war than we've ever been in our life.
Dude,
so
oh man, that. We were looking at the clock the other day, and I'm looking at how much I was remembering the old song 2 Minutes to Midnight. Man, the old Iron Maiden song, and I'm like, dude, we're at fucking like 20 seconds to midnight right now.
Although what I would say is like people always think things are super extreme, like the hippies in the 60s, and they're like, this is gonna be the downfall of America. You know, it's like I think it's because social media, they make money by promoting stuff because they get more clicks and they get more views and they get more buyers. So they make it a bigger deal than it is to some people.
Oh, dude,
But
yeah.
there is a lot of shit going on.
There is a lot of shit going on, but I had this conversation with someone the other day. I was like, I was actually having this conversation yesterday because we had a mass shooting in Fort Smith and Fordyce. I don't know if you saw that on the national news. We had a mass shooting, and like 3 people died, 10 people were injured, and everyone was it's all over social media. It's everywhere. And I was like, man, I remember back when that school shooting happened at Jonesboro, and even now today you talk about it and everybody's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, man, one of the first school shootings was in Arkansas. And they're like, what? No, it wasn't. Columbine was like the first school shooting. I was like, no, man.
No.
Jonesboro happened way before Columbine did. And people are like, what? And I'm like, yeah, man, it's because of social media. Like everybody knows what happened in Fordyce. And like, I'm not saying people shouldn't know about it. They should know about it. And it was a horrendous thing that this dude did, and nobody even knows why he did it. And at least yet. And this scumbag goes in and just starts taking people out, and it's horrible. And hearing the stories is horrible. And those people deserve for their stories to be heard. But man, you go back to stuff like this and you got people saying stuff like this has never happened in Arkansas. Dude, yes, it did, man. When I was a kid, Jonesboro happened, man. And those people deserve to be remembered too. But like, it's social media. We talk, people are talking about everything that's happening in the Middle East and in Israel and everything right now. I remember all the crap that was going on over there in the 80s. Like, and you hardly ever hear about all the stuff that was going on in the Middle East in the 80s and stuff.
Yeah,
and
it never stops.
Yeah, it never stops. And we didn't have social media back then. So we didn't have everybody talking about all the atrocities that were going on with the Ayatollah and all the other stuff that was happening over there because we didn't have social media.
By the way, we fucked up Iran. It's like that originally they had the Shah. And, everyone hated the Shah, super corrupt, super brutal, all that stuff. So they had a popular revolution, overthrew him, and they brought in their first ever democratically elected leader. And we thought, well, maybe he's a little bit too left-wing. So then we gave money for the Shah to have like a rebellion and like get his power back. And now he was twice as brutal. And then the minute that they deposed him again for the second time, and they were out of money, so that's when they got the Ayatollah involved and all that sort of stuff. Because those are the only people with money.
Yep.
They're not even like a lot of the people in Iran aren't even like pro that like Sharia law, like hardcore.
Most of them are. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, my friends.
Like, we had no money, and so what we did is, so the Shah was going to get deposed again, and now the people really hated him, but he was sick, so we smuggled him out, smuggled him to Florida, and we were giving him treatment. I think he had cancer.
Man, it was cancer.
They're like, just give us the Shah back, and they took our embassy hostage. They're like, just give the Shah back and we'll just call it even. We're like, no, fuck you. And we screw up a lot of stuff, but we didn't have social media as much, so people didn't know the whole backstory. People didn't know
that. Yeah, man. Yeah. And it's like,
or like the Cuban Missile Crisis. We had missiles,
dude, it was Turkey, so bad,
right next to the Soviet Union. So they're like, oh, you're gonna fuck with us, we'll fuck with you. So then they send missiles over to Cuba. So they didn't really, make it like obvious for the public, but they're like, okay, we'll pull the missiles from Turkey. So they did. That's what made the whole thing, dissolve.
That's what smoothed it over. Well, it's just like everybody's talking about, well, what was the deal with Saddam Hussein while Clinton was in? Well, number one, he was like paying him off to stay calm. And number two, back in like 94, he fired cruise missiles at the dude. And he was like, if you don't want more of that, you need to calm it down. And like, we didn't know because we didn't have social media. And if you weren't there for the like 30 minutes that they interrupted television for, you didn't know about it because they
Right.
didn't print it in the papers. They didn't print it in the papers. We had fired cruise missiles at Iraq. Like,
Oh, we could be
they,
here all day talking about all the bullshit
yeah.
they do. Like with Kuwait, like the whole my dad was in the first Gulf War, but my dad even said this because he is a doctorate in anthropology. He's like a historian and all this stuff. So what happened is Kuwait was like they were drilling diagonally into Iraq and they were stealing the oil.
Yep.
And and the Iraqis go, "You better stop, you better stop." And then finally they asked us, they're like, "Yeah, can we, you mind if we make them stop and invade?" We're like, "Oh yeah, go ahead." So then they invaded, they were like, "It's a violation," and we go to war.
Yep. Yeah. And
Very,
it's
very
like,
typical American politics.
very typical American politics, man. And it's like it's always, hey man, the dude across the pond is the one that's wrong. It
Yeah.
can't be us, man. It's the dude that has it's that dude that has darker skin that's wrong. And we've got all the folks over here that have
I
darker
don't
skin.
even think
Like, wait
it's
a
dark
second.
as skin. It's like, where can I make money?
Yeah, no, that guy's got money. Well,
Like
it
we
always
invaded
ends up being
Iraq and
that.
they set fire to the oil fields, so we stopped the invasion of Iraq and go save the oil fields.
And then you have the whole crap in Syria where like we're like, okay, let's do the same it's the same thing they did in Iran. It's the same thing. They're like, "Oh, well, we've got this dude who says he's on our side. Let's give him money and weapons and shit so he can take over." And then he's like, "Psych, I wasn't really on your side." And it's like, "Oh my god,
We
we've been
betrayed
bamboozled
so many
again."
people so often. It's amazing, yeah.
It's gross
But
and
we
it's
we
what
can go off in politics all
yeah,
day.
we could. But anyhow, it's it's all about the idea is all about kind of where my head went. Like with the last thing we were talking about with that was 80s dark fantasy stuff, and it's it had that whole through line always of this stuff's really going bad because you're not showing the proper respect to the world around you, the people around you, and you're not being kind to folks. And that's why things are going sideways. And it's like never ending story. You've got this cat that's up in an attic reading this book, and he's like reading about this dude who he thinks he can help save his world. And he's up in that attic because he's like getting bullied and stuff. Like he's got people being mean to him and stuff. And so he's hiding. And you're like, this dude's hiding away. And this whole story is like a microcosm of his own story because it's where he's trying to find power and where he's trying to get some kind of catharsis for his own issues. And that's why we write stories at the end of the day, man, is so we all can understand things better and try to have some catharsis. Even these stories that people say, "Oh man, that story doesn't really matter that much." That's just, I hate it when someone's like, "That movie didn't mean anything. That movie was just like
Yeah, don't watch
some
it.
kind of popcorn
if,
entertainment movie."
if it didn't
Cool.
do something
Don't
for
watch it.
you, then don't watch it. Yeah,
Like
it's
it
ridiculous.
doesn't
People
have
go
to do
on
something for
rants about
everyone.
stuff. Like if you go on a rant about something, you actually make it more popular. So you're like you remember the whole thing with like they're putting labels on music. Like by putting labels in music, you know why they stopped? They realized that label made it a
Made it
bestseller.
sell more. Yeah, man. God, I remember it so much. I think it was a Public Enemy album
Yeah,
that I first saw.
fuck the
The
police.
yeah, that I
NWA.
first saw the explicit lyrics thing on,
Ball Game was
and
awesome. Yeah, bring the
yeah,
noise. Yeah.
yeah, man. And I was like, my mom was like, "Oh, you can't get that. It's got explicit lyrics." And I was like, "Okay, well, here's one that doesn't have the sticker on it." And she's like, "Oh, okay, that's fine."
Yeah, who wanted that?
Like, like I seriously just peeled the sticker off, like in front of you. And it's we got so enamored of that type of stuff. And like you said, it goes back to that. But I hate it when people are like, oh, well, that was just entertainment. That was just a popcorn movie. Good, man. We need that shit sometimes. Like, I don't always want to go watch, The English Patient or The Crying Game or something like that. I don't always want to be super upset. I do get a lot of crap because I don't like happy endings. I
Right.
don't like happy endings for the sake of happy endings. And so in a lot of my stories, there won't
No,
be a
I
happy
agree.
ending.
If it's appropriate, it's appropriate. But like Hollywood does a big thing, like for a long time, where like it's always got to have a happy
Always got to
ending.
be
Yeah.
happy ending. Yeah, man, and I hate that. And Sound
But
of
going with
Silence.
that, going real quick with your thing about like it doesn't have to have a deep meaning. Like I love Pacific Rim. I thought Pacific Rim was a great movie. I mean, it's robots versus monsters. It's like there's not some deep meaning behind it.
No, man, it's not going to ever win an Academy Award, but anything Charlie Hunnam's in, I'm going to watch. Like, I love that dude. And
And
like
Del
ever
Toro is just
since
awesome. Like
oh,
anything Del Toro
anything
does, like Pan's
anything he
Labyrinth is
does, man.
awesome. Like I even like
Anything he
his
does.
version of the Hellboy. You
Oh,
know,
dude, I've got the Del Toro. I can't get my door open because I blocked it with my mic stand, but I've got the Del Toro Tarot right here. I use that thing every day. My wife bought that for me, and it's got a bunch of like Del Toro art on it and stuff, man. And he is
have you watched Cabinet of Curiosities, like the
oh yeah,
animated
all
show?
of it.
Yeah,
All of it, man.
fucking
I've
amazing.
watched it
Yeah.
all. It's so good. There's so much Lovecraft in there too.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
man,
Well, there are a couple
Lovecraft,
of direct Lovecraft, but there are some like the autopsy. That's a
yeah,
Lovecraft tale.
that's
Or
Lovecraft.
like Lot 38.
100%.
That's a Lovecraft
That's
tale.
Lovecraft. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And I mean, there are a couple, like you said, that are directly Lovecraft, like Tales from the Witch House and The Painter. Never
I
can
think
remember the title of that.
this model, yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I never can remember the title of that story, but it's just gorgeous, and it's the way he did it, and I think it's fantastic because I have a really big problem with HP Lovecraft as a person because he was an enormous racist. So I
Right.
have a real big problem with
He
him as a
was
person.
also the only thing I would say, I mean, obviously, that was horrible, but the only thing I would say is like he was a scared little boy. Like
Yeah,
his
100%.
mom would say, "You're too ugly to go in public," and she would lock him in the house. So he like, it's not an excuse, but
It's a reason.
he just
Yeah.
didn't know. And like as he got out, like if you notice, like the one lady he married is Jewish and moved to Brooklyn. So it's like he was a scared little boy, and it seems like he was like a little bit just trying to deal with the world because he probably felt like everything was against him.
Yeah, I get that about him, but the thing I love about Del Toro is Del Toro brought those amazing stories out of that era of hatefulness and brought them kind of into a modern era where he can still tell the stories and tell them for what they're worth and put this great meaning behind the stories and tell them in an entertaining way and take away all the more problematic sides of them
Problem.
uh and not lose the core of the story. It was really awesome to see Tales from the Witch House without a lot of there were still some of the classist undertones in there that had to be there to tell that story, because you have to tell that story from the point of view of a middle class dude who loses everything and kind of goes a little crazy and is addicted to stuff. You have to have those parts in there to tell that story properly. But I think the way he handled it, and Rupert Grant, man, God, that dude has come so far as an actor. since he was just Harry Potter's goofy sidekick. Man, he has come so far. Watching him in that, and I mean, Tales from the Witch House is one of my favorite Lovecrafts, but watching him in that and just the specificity and the moments he chose to sit down in that film were just beautiful.
Well,
Like,
my favorite Lovecraft is At the Mountains of Madness.
oh
And I
yeah.
know Del Toro keeps trying to adapt it. He even had like major actors like Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise attached to it. He just can't get the money because studios don't see it being popular. But
Studios don't
I'd
see it being
love to see that.
popular. Oh, and it's so stupid that studios don't see it being popular because you think back to man, here I'm gonna go forgetting movie titles again. But you think back to all of the things that we've done throughout the years, like The Thing, right? Like that was a Lovecraftian story,
A
man,
very
if I've ever
Lovecraft,
seen
yeah.
it. And
The
like
Mist, did you see The Mist?
The Mist, yeah,
Yeah.
man. The Mist. That was very Lovecraftian and actually Stephen Kingian. Stephen King and Lovecraft tend to shake hands a lot. But it's just it's this thing of I feel like once again we were talking about earlier on, studios have gotten this idea of what the public wants to see, and that's why we've gotten into such a absolute just shit trough of entertainment over the last few years.
And they keep
Is
like they take stuff that like authors wrote that were awesome and they ruin it. Like The Witcher. Like that first season
oh,
of The Witcher was amazing. And Henry Cavill, I mean, he's kind of nerd, you know.
he's a huge
I'm kind of
nerd.
a nerd. I've got
Yeah,
read
me
so,
too.
but you know, like he's a huge fan. So when they started going off the novels, like you do this, I'm out. I'm like, you're not gonna leave. He's like, all right, I'm out. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's what he said. I do a little bit of voiceover work myself, and I have just really enjoyed I can't remember the guy's name right now. I suck with names so bad, man. His name's Frank something. But the guy who did most of them, and he actually had a horrible car accident and it caused him like some brain damage and changed his ability to read so smoothly. And so then he never did any more of the Dark Towers past the fifth one.
Wow.
And it's so interesting to hear about that stuff. But yeah, man. That's been super exciting talking to you, dude.
Yeah, thank you.
It's
Yeah, let's wrap it up because it's like running for a long period of time.
yeah.
But tell me what you got going on and how people can see it. And it sounds like you've had like quite a variety of projects over the years.
I have, man. I've done a lot of acting. I've done a lot of voice work. I've got some stuff up on Audible that you can still find. I still have one movie out there, with Avi Nash, from The Walking Dead. That one is on. It's on Amazon, but it's not on Amazon Prime. You have to buy it. It's called Hosea. It's got a lot of other well-known actors in it, but Avi's my buddy, so I always throw him out there. And then we've got a pilot, cartoon pilot we're shooting here locally next weekend. So next weekend I'll be in the studio to do that. I have The Forgotten, which is the first novel, that I'm hoping beyond hope it'll be out by the end of the year this year. And then of course, anywhere books are sold, you got stuff, Tales from Places. Just search that. You can just search stuff, WC Banning, and you can find it. It's on Amazon. It's on Kindle Unlimited right now for free. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can go grab the EPUB for free. And
Do you have
yeah,
a
man.
website?
I do. My own personal website is down right now because we're trying to get everything fixed. But also, just a quick shout out, I'm also the co-executive director of the River Valley Literary Society. And my baby inside that society is the Fort Smith Writers Guild. You can check all of that out at fortsmithwriters.com.
Okay.
So,
And do you have like what's the best way to see what you have out and buy your shit and give you money?
best way to get a hold of me is on Facebook. You look for WC Banning.
Okay.
That's the best way to find me. I'm the only WC Banning out there, and so that's the best way to find me. And I have all my links up there, to the books and everything else, and all of my other projects too. Um, all
Okay.
those links are
Are you
there.
on Instagram or TikTok or
I am on TikTok, and it is at Codafet on TikTok, but it is, if you search WC Banning, my screen name on there is actually WC Banning. So if you search me on there, TikTok, I've got a pretty decent following there. My Instagram, I don't pay attention to it as much as I should.
are you on
But it is
Twitter
there.
or is X now?
It's X now. Yeah, I'm Codafet on all of those, but my main stuff for my writing is TikTok and Facebook. And
Do you
everybody's
do
after
the
me to
dances on TikTok?
not as much as I do, not as much as I do the lip syncing crap in the past. If you go back to some of my older videos, it gets real fucking embarrassing. But but see, I've been on that app since it was called Musically way back in the day.
Wow, I did not even know that. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And it that was back when all we did was lip sync on it. So if you go back to like fucking, what is it, like 2015 on that thing, you can see all kinds of embarrassing videos of me because I never take anything down. I don't care if I'm embarrassing or not. Like, I don't take anything down. Most recent one of those videos though, it's up to about 2,000 views. We put it up a couple days ago to advertise for Camp Fiction, which is our summer camp we're doing for writing for kids here with River Valley Literary Society. It's pretty funny. We did it kind of lost footage style with these puppets, these unicorn puppets my wife made. And it's very lost footagey, and it's very weird and a little bit creepy, and I love it. I like those vibes. I like creepy vibes. We were talking about
That's
horror
awesome.
earlier. I prefer
I love it
creepy
too when
vibes
people
over
get
horror
like
vibes.
a little bit like they get like a little bit over the top comical, like Team America World Police. Did you see that?
Yeah.
That was
Yes. Oh yeah.
awesome.
Great.
Yeah, yeah. And like
That's that.
they're doing the puppets and like when they have the puppets fucking each other.
Oh, it was so hilarious, man. Crank yankers back in the day. I
Yeah.
loved it so much, man. The puppets making crank phone calls and all kinds of shit. It's so great. I love all that stuff. And I grew up on puppets because it's the 80s and dark fantasy and the Muppets and all that stuff. So
No, my girl's
don't
big into Jim Henson, like anything Jim
oh,
Henson. Yeah.
oh man, I love it all. And don't be surprised if in the next short story collection something doesn't come up that reminds you of Fraggle Rock. So
All right, man. So
all right, man.
let's wrap it up because it's probably already gone way too long now. But
Yeah.
do you have anything else you want to throw out there?
I think that's about it. As far as how to get a hold of me and all the stuff I'm doing right now, just kind of doing the writing group once a month, every second Tuesday at the Bakery District in Fort Smith, Arkansas. It's 70 South 7th Street. Come down, hang out with us. We talk about writing. We have guest speakers all the time. Writers that are virtual or that come in and talk about their stuff. And we discuss the writing process. It's real informal. It's really fun. 6 p.m. every second Tuesday in the cooler room at the Bakery District, 70 South 7th Street in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Okay, awesome. All right, everybody, check out his stuff, give him money. And thank you very much for being on the show.
Man, I appreciate it. I'm glad to have had the opportunity. Thanks, man.